long day, so I am really excited to see that we are all here and committed, and obviously we have a very prominent speaker that we really want to hear from. So thank you, and I would like to invite the African Union Commissioner in Education and Science, please, Professor Belochin, to come to stage and to share with us some thoughts. This is a very exciting year, the year of education, African Union. So, good morning. Thank you.
It's working? Oh, okay. Madame Chair, chers participants,
dear participants,
good morning. Zulfulaun, Habari, Zasubuhi. Je voudrais d'abord vous remercier.
I should first and foremost like to thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be here amongst you all and to take the floor at this first edition of the Conference on Education, Data and Statistics. I'm very aware of its importance for the establishment of an international community of practice among statisticians, education statisticians, but not only, I would say, among education practitioners, generally speaking. This is a forum where we are able to learn from one another and find solutions to our shared problems. I'm very pleased and heartened to see there are a number of states that are members of the African Union who are present here today and have shared their experiences. You may be aware that I'm from the health sector, in fact, and I find that the education sector is a fantastic cross-cutting area. In health, we have worked to create protocols that can be applied right across the country to cure diseases by ensuring that we have prevention of contagion and for the protection of vulnerable groups. And having worked as a coordinator of the UN system before being recruited as commissioner at the African Union, I would just like to share a few observations before telling you what we are doing within the African Union. I may entitle the first observation as, let's start at the beginning, first things first. And why do I say this? I say this because if we really wish to talk about sustainable human development, it's important to remember that the MDGs were focused on the concept of human development. Following that, the SDGs, which are linked to the MDG, was a widening of the concept by bringing in aspects pertaining to climate change, the environment, and energy, primarily. And obviously, for each of these chapters, other indicators were designated so as to monitor progress made in the countries. And therefore, if we wish to speak of sustainable development, as I was saying, the first system of reliable data, if we remember that a human is at the heart of sustainable development, it's the existence of a civil registration system. That's very important because this system is mandatory, which is constant, universal, and which makes it possible to record births, deaths, marriages, divorces, etc. And now if we begin with date births, civil registration outlines the existence of an individual, and when this individual comes into existence, two social systems that person will have to deal with right from the outset are health and education. Therefore, these are systems that have fundamental importance. They must be systematic and they must be effective. The exact number of births and deaths enable us to calculate the number of children that need schooling in a particular region, and this is a precious tool for planning and for taking part in public policies of education, health, and in other fields as well. Furthermore, the fact that we are able to record this data in a constant manner enables us to see trends. So, for example, if this year there were 10,000 births this year, and next year there are 7,000 births, one could ask the question, what happened? Was there a displacement of the population? Was there an epidemic? A disaster of some sort? And on the contrary, when there are increases in the number of births, it enables us to make adjustments. So, for example, if there are more children, we need more schools. And we will need to recruit more teachers so that these children's right to education is upheld. And this helps policymakers. It gives them a stable denominator, one that is precise and enables us to avoid overestimations, something that's fairly common as a way to attract more resources to the region. That's very common in this system. And in the health sector, I can give you an example of this. If you take a look at the experts in each health specialty, ask them, can you give us an estimate of the number of deaths for each disease? And if you tot up all of the estimations provided by experts, well, that figure exceeds the number of deaths recorded. So if you don't cross-check this data, it means that the estimations are not necessarily precise, I should say, because the expert is convinced and sometimes may add a little more because as a way to attract more resources for their particular department, whether it's gastroenterology or another field. And so they'll say, this is the field where we have more deaths, and so we need more resources. And this is what leads to inter-regional competition for education. However, yesterday we heard the example from Kenya. I haven't been able to find recent figures, but in sub-Saharan Africa in 2013, UNICEF estimated that the number of individuals who aren't recorded on civil registries at 50%. And this is why it is necessary for the sovereignty of nations, and all African ministers together made this declaration in Yamoussoukro in February 2015. And it helps to meet the objectives set out by the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs. And as I was saying, I don't have precise figures for today, but you can imagine that much remains to be done, particularly if we keep in mind the word sustainable in Sustainable Development Goals. Now, my second observation, we need to ensure that we act at the right time. Now, I'd like to share an anecdote that has being very interesting to me. I was working for the WHO in Nigeria in 2004 for the polio eradication program, and we conducted a vaccination day in a neighborhood of Abuja. So I arrived in the morning. There were 3 buildings. And it was a very sunny day, blue sky, and at the entrance of these buildings there was a magnificent young child, 4 or 5 years of age, who was lit up by the sun. His feet in a lake, in a puddle of stagnant water. I asked the driver to stop. I took a look at the child. I got out of the car and I thought, I'm here to give vaccinations to children. Am I doing the right thing? Now, why did I wonder this? Well, there is an issue of relevance. And what is this? Well, this child is exposed to the risks of transmissible disease, and I try to provide them with vaccinations against these diseases. Now, what would happen if the money that we're putting in that campaign, and I'm not saying that I was against this vaccination campaign, I'm just saying that we should think a little bit more about what we're doing when it comes to the needs of development. If all of this money was invested in the implementation of a network worthy of the name of the network, for example, when the Vietnamese War ended, the government decided to ensure that all families had access to drinkable water. Does this investment have a greater impact in the long term on the health system, for example? And this is why I emphasize the word sustainable. Or must we go problem by problem, sector by sector, agency by agency to try to do the same thing by overlapping things and not leaving anything behind? And I think this is something that we must consider. And unfortunately, global cooperation is not always synchronous with national development. And this is often the case when countries don't have many resources. And this is why I think that as supranational organizations, we have to be attentive to countries and adjust our cooperation programs to their needs and not vice versa.
Could I just have some water, please? Maybe you can bring up a bottle. The third point I want to make is about training courses and training systems, because here we're talking about statistics, of course. Thank you for the water. Information systems are very important too. Information is the key word here, which means you've got a system of interacting items, and it depends on the interaction with the environment and stability. Now, I'm not a systems expert. I'm sure there are people who know a lot more than I do and could tell us. But an information system is one that I would describe as social and technical. There are two subsystems. You've got the technical subsystem, that's to say technology, IT, computers, connections, and telecoms, etc. So there's that. But the social subsystem consists of the organizational structure, that's to say the administration, if you can put it that way, of an area of a country and the people who run it. So when a system is made up of people, for it to function correctly, you need huge investment in this social subsystem. You have to persuade people, you have to train, you have to support, you have to incrementally implement the various parts that make up the system. You mustn't forget that in a country without any statistics culture, you shouldn't imagine you're immediately going to get all the sustainable development KPIs. However hard you work, etc., it won't work. So it's a long-term task. It's a long road whereby the people involved, we're talking about teachers or officials in educational systems or research workers, they need the time to adjust and gradually improve their methods of connecting, analyzing, and disseminating their data. So it's a long-term task that requires considerable human resource investment and determination and perseverance. So I tried to set up a system for monitoring transmissible diseases in Nigeria, in particular the north of the country. And it took us over a year of working hard in the field with high-level experts to bringing a health information system, that's to say monitoring transmissible diseases, and make it able to deliver on the criteria. It's very complicated, simply because people get put off very easily, especially those who weren't convinced from the start. And in Nigeria, yes, I've heard people talk about reluctance. It's true, it does exist. Politicians are reluctant because if they have data that are not as good as the neighboring countries, they'll be accused of being inefficient, underperforming. So they tend to keep a lid on everything rather than move forward. So we have a very important advocacy role to convince and reassure so that people don't feel they're being dragged out of their zone of comfort before they hand over the statistics. Because that would mean, they say, in my country, children can't read or write. So I've been running this country for 6 years, means I've done nothing. Whereas if we can explain that we're not trying to blame anyone, point the finger, shame anyone, but on the contrary, so that we can know where we're coming from and how far we can go and how far we want to go at the end of this road. If we don't do the advocacy, you can never get the national buy-in. In the same way, the teachers don't like pupil assessment because if it's not that good, they take it as a personal affront, as a proof that they're not good enough, not skilled enough. They're worried about their careers. They're worried that this could be used against them rather than a driver of progress and simply assessment. Obviously, information systems I'm talking about do not cover all data. We saw on the first day presentations on monitoring of some children from pre-primary through to entry into working life. Now that can be done as ad hoc surveys or one-off, even if they're long-term surveys. And these can be added to the system, the schema. But the information system has to be the sectoral extension. So if we're talking about sustainable development, and ideally in a given country, we want to be able to provide the data we need to assess all aspects of sustainable development, not just education. You need registration of the population, and you need information about public policies across all social sectors, not just education or health. Obviously, further down the road, there'll be information about the economy. It's usually central banks that deal with that. And as I was saying earlier, if you want to have a genuinely useful overview, a dashboard with all your sustainable development indicators, that's how you have to go about it. Listening to Mr. Piper yesterday, I realized you need to measure early, comparably, and he said that this is the right year for us, especially in Africa, because it's education year. But I would add you need to have routine measurement, because everything I'm talking about is setting up a routine data measurement system that gets into the culture of administration and governance in a country. Obviously, there are certain specific things about education, and the very idea of a peer-to-peer dialogue has been slow coming through in education. As I say, countries are reluctant to let other countries influence their education policies. Education is considered to be a sensitive political area and is a national responsibility. This is why I was saying we need a lot of advocacy. So what are we doing in the African Union? There are many areas in which countries can learn from each other. If this is done in the right context, the African Union does provide a framework to its members through its continental strategy for education for Africa. It's known as CESAR, I think. So we have an architecture bringing together countries around the continental strategy targets, and to a large extent, there are KPIs that relate to SDG 4. And we have thematic groups with experts from countries and from agencies, partners. We also have a specialized technical committee, which every 2 years organizes an education minister summit. And we have the CETANS group. I think it's 10 heads of state who are seen as education champions and try to help us with advocacy so that we can keep education as a priority in the AU development agenda. Obviously, we work with our EU partners that themselves have gone down the difficult road of transnational political dialogue over the last 50 years in the field of education. And it's interesting to see that in 50 years of work, not everything has been done. There are still some issues to be addressed and solved. This is why we are hopeful that one day or another we'll make it in Africa too. Political dialogue is a process that requires considerable resources, which is difficult for us, of course, given our limitations. And we've committed to prioritizing dialogue in education. The African challenges calls for African solutions that needs to be hammered out in dialogue between African leaders. When we say this, we're not talking about withdrawal within our own borders, but we do want to be independent, drawing on other international experiences when they're relevant, so that we can identify our own way through to our solution on the basis of our own specifics and challenges. We are about to produce a review of the period 2016 to 2025 and design the next stage. And as far as possible, because we know there's a lot of data missing, but as far as possible, we will go for an approach based on reliable data and a participatory approach involving all actors. And the experience of a thematic group will doubtless help us there. We're aware that countries have different education programs starting at different times with different horizons and scopes. And if we're not careful, these agendas at times can be in competition or even opposition. There are national sector plans, continental strategic plans, and of course SDG 4, which is applicable to everyone. It's easy for countries to feel they've been overwhelmed by the requirements in terms of reports, etc., whereas their monitoring capabilities are limited. Once again, in the African Union, we've tried to work with our partners, in particular your body here in UNESCO, to align the continental and global monitoring framework so that countries will be asked to deliver only one report rather than 2 or 3, because these people are already very, very busy. We've had very close collaboration in the national calibration process for SDG 4. This is a process that we have supported. We think is an excellent tool to align agendas, cycles, and indicators. We've also extended our approach to 3 or 4 CESAR indicators so that we can have political dialogue around national priorities in this process. As has been said here in the last couple of days, we are restricted by our lack of data. UNESCO has helped to make up for our lack of data concerning a number of basic issues, completion rates, etc. But we hope that all countries will be able to meet these requirements, which brings me back to what I said at the beginning. We attach particular importance to improving our knowledge in maths and science for our children and young people. However, there are very few countries that really monitor primary and secondary training in these areas, which means that governments do not have a clear understanding of their situation and the speed with which they can improve and go for the policies to be implemented. It's a very important area that will be difficult to impose on countries, given that we are starting from a much lower level. As I said, we have to start from the beginning. That's the two major pillars I mentioned. Then we can ask countries to move in that direction. Otherwise, if we try to do everything at once, countries are overwhelmed, both in terms of policy and technology, or you'll have a scattergun approach as suddenly happens. You will have experts that will give you a bunch of samples, but that will just be a one-off snapshot, but that won't solve the problem of the sustainability of development. Many countries got outside support for apprenticeship, but this didn't deliver any tangible results simply because this was all fragmented without an overall vision for developing capabilities in institutions and to support the education ministry and, of course, our people, because at the end of the day, that's what's about. So this is an area where African countries and their institutions can work together so as to share and pool their knowledge and know-how. The African Union will support such initiatives. There was a ministerial decision in October, following which we will be launching the Spotlight initiative, working with the African Education Evaluation Institute, so as to develop an African framework. The idea is that all African apprenticeship themes can be included with the national, transnational, such as evaluations of minimum learning skills that we saw presented yesterday. This is an initial stage which is vital to be more efficient in our use of technical support and have more countries that can report back on their apprenticeship performance. So we'll be looking at that this year, which, as I said, is Education Year 2024. And at the end of the year, we hope to have been able to show that there are specific examples of the joint action between member states so we can improve education. As for teachers, higher education, technical and vocational training, TVET, but also the use of statistics and the use of statistics systems generating on a regular basis reliable. This will be one of the main functions of the EU in education, developing and managing continental education information systems in connection with regions and countries. The ultimate aim being to use this information to harmonize our policies and education policies on the continent so as to realize the EU vision in this field. I'm sure this is similar to what colleagues in other regions want to do. Let me finish on a little story. I'm reading a book that was written by a giant of African history and development. Joseph Kizerbo now has passed on. He wrote a book at the request of UNESCO and UNICEF some 30, 40 years ago, back in the 90s. It was called Educate or Perish. And in various parts of the book, you will find a number of key things I've said now 40 years ago, which gives us a pause for thought, because in many areas we've been going around in circles. How can we move forward then? As someone who knows the UN system, I would say that system has a key role to play, but it cannot be played if we take the silo-by-silo approach. It's much too compartmentalized. Interagency competition, duplication, the competition for resources, all of this prevents us from working efficiently, focusing on what we really want, that's to say, achieving sustainable development goals. Let's hope that this can change for the better for everyone in the Global South. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Brilliant. I think that it has been very inspiring, and also at the same time leaving the message about the need to work and to change. I think we have been appealing the call for trying to see how we can join forces together, how we can prioritize, and at the same time the effort of working and convincing. And I think that the point of convincing, forming, helping to actually to build capacities and to support the process is very important, as well as some examples about how the joint efforts are actually led in Africa to try to harmonize, such as a common framework for the assessment. So thank you so much. I know that you are very busy, and it's a very busy time ahead of the African Union Summit in this year of education. So thank you so much, and with that we are going to make straight the transition to the next panel, the next agenda item, that is about regional organizations, and we're going to hear exactly to this call to work together and to work together in partnership. So thank you so much, and we are going to invite the speakers and the moderator to the floor. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Over the past few days, we have been listening to very rich discussions about the crucial role of quality and comparable data in measuring progress, for accountability to inform policy formulation and implementation. We also heard of the many challenges that countries face in this process and the diversity of these challenges between countries and regions. This morning, we have the opportunity to have a number of regional organizations with us, to converse with us, and to share a little bit about their roles in supporting the process in their regions. So I welcome each of you. Thank you very much for being here. In the interest of time, I will call on you for each question when I pose the question. So thank you very much. There will be 2 questions. This morning we will begin. The first one is just to see how your organization is supporting the governments of your member states to improve the collection of comparable data, to monitor regional and global progress in education. Please keep your responses 3 to 4 minutes. Thank you. I will first call upon Mr. Albert Nancy-Gyumva, Executive Secretary of ADEA, Association for Development of Education.
Thank you, moderator, for inviting me, and especially to UIS that has engaged us since even before this event. I think it was really very important for us to meet before as a region, so that we can better understand how to address some of the issues that are coming out of this. Now, to respond to your question, and I'm actually trying to follow up from what the Commissioner of Education, Science and Technology under the African Union has just mentioned. I think one of the critical issues that we're trying to resolve is to make sure that countries take lead. I mean, African countries in this context. Of course, for countries to take lead, there are a number of requirements that need to be in place. First, they need to better understand their needs, because without understanding the needs, there's no you can prioritize. So the first thing is really engaging countries so that they are able, through surveys, in order to better have a data priority needs. And then that will help to develop strategies, and that's really at the level of the country itself. Then they can come up with strategies in terms of developing, being EMIS or EMIS modules, and so on and so forth. The second that we do is also, in light with that, raising awareness of the importance of comparable data, both regional, continental, and global. I forgot to mention also at the country level. And we have different ways of engaging this awareness. We have various high-level policy dialogue forum that we developed. And we always make sure that the decision makers are the one actually coming to articulate on what exactly they are doing in terms of using quality data in the education system, and the consequences of making decisions that are not relying on data and evidence. I think that's really a second thing that we also did. Together with the REX and the African Union, ADEA has developed norms and standards on EMIS, and those have actually helped to engage in peer review mechanism. So far, we've reached more than 10 countries, because it's also a very important exercise, making sure that countries can evaluate between themselves how they are performing when it comes to data. The fourth one, as part of one of the critical initiatives that we have just launched, and we are here, I've met several partners here, we've just initiated something we call Tackling the Data Challenge on the Continent. And the idea here is to leverage educational technology to improve capacity in our member countries, capacity to collect, to analyze, to report, and of course to disseminate quality data. We're targeting 30 countries over the coming 5 years, and we're looking forward to engage with a number of partners that are here to see how we can strengthen the capacity of countries. So let me stop here as part of this question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Albert. I will now pass it on to Helen Royal, Director of Human and Social Development, the Caribbean Community, CARICOM.
Thank you very much. And let me firstly really express our gratitude for having been given that opportunity to participate in this forum. In regards to your question as to how our organization, which is the CARICOM Secretariat, supports our member states, Let me first provide some context. The CARICOM Secretariat is actually the administrative arm of the Caribbean community, and we serve 20 countries, 15 being member states and 5 associated members. Our education sector is actually guided by our framework and roadmap, which is the CARICOM Human Resource Development 2030 strategy. And actually it provides the guidance to the development of the education sector and also direction as it relates to the region's response to the SDGs. This is a very ambitious strategy with a time span of 2018 to 2030, but what it aims on doing is to ensure that the needs of the education sector, that is across all the 3 levels, basic, tertiary, and skills for lifelong learning, that they are relevant to the needs of the 21st century economies and society. We actually work with member states through the operation of, for the execution of operation plans. And what we have been doing is working with member states that individual member states have adapted this strategy and have committed to ensuring that their national plans are aligned to the SDGs and the strategy. We have also been providing support in that we work with them on identifying the gaps in the data collection, providing them with the tools, the resources, and technical support where possible to ensure that even at the end, even with the analysis of the data, that they are provided support. I must say also that we work with our partners, so we have the Caribbean Development Bank that has actually supported us in the establishment of what we call a regional network of planning officers. So every member state, there is that established group, and they have the responsibility of coordinating, monitoring, and reporting on the data. They have actually developed a matrix that when they collect the data, they can populate through that matrix. And this has been working very well, notwithstanding the fact that, as you would know, we had issues post-COVID, but we were able, through the support of our partners, to continue doing just that. The operation of the strategy, which also embraces the UN Sustainable Development Goals, actually it's going to be through 3 phases, and we have also received support from the bank, Central Caribbean Development Bank, to hire a consultant, and the consultant is currently being contracted, and he will be working on ensuring that we have the progress report for the phase 1 of that strategy. So I think listening yesterday to what has been happening, I think our issues are the same. I think now that we have that consultant, it's really going to feed into the new indicators that will be that the consultant will be working on defining. I also must say that for education and data, we have the support even at political level. So we take the recommendations from the regional nursing, regional planning officers, and we get endorsement at what we call the Council of Human and Social Development, where we have the ministers of education endorsing and providing support and urging member states to align their plans. We also continue to meet with senior officials through meetings, and I must say that although we have challenges, but we have a framework that can, if augmented, especially in reference to ensuring that the indicators that we have are adaptable, I can see us making progress in the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ellen. Now passing the floor to Mr. Rolando Ocampo, Chief of Statistics Division of ECLAC, United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean.
Thank you. So the UN Regional Commissions, particularly Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, so they play a crucial role in supporting member states in various development areas. So the ECLAC Statistics Division focus on promoting the generation and use of international comparable, timely, and relevant statistical information for economic, social, and environmental policy formulation, monitoring, and evaluation in our region, Latin America, and the Caribbean. This mission is executed through 3 key actions. The first one, the promotion of best practices and dissemination of comparable methodologies internationally. The second one, advisory and technical cooperation to enhance countries' technical and institutional capacities in statistics. And the third one, facilitating experience and horizontal cooperation, including methodological development activities. In this case, technical support is particularly emphasized in this case for the implementation of household surveys, addressing aspects such as methodological designs like frames, samples, expression factors, while contact recommendations are direct by the specialized UN agencies, for example, ILO, UNESCO, UNICEF, or others. These household surveys are fundamental for calculating various indicators, including the process that allows the construction of indicators with a focus on regional comparability through collaboration agreements with the countries in our region. So we have a database, a regional database, we call it BADEOC, where we have we made the comparability for more than 100 indicators covering topics like poverty, income inequality, education, employment, access to basic service, ICT, and household expenses that are currently built. So all this information, you can find it in our database and in web that we call it CEPALStat in our web in ECLAC. In this matter, ECLAC already collaborates with UNESCO, UES, in calculating SDG indicators for the 4th goal report that are reported annually for updating the global education indicator base. At the same time, ECLAC, as the main repository of household surveys in Latin America and the Caribbean countries, provides access to the UN colleagues, particularly UNESCO and the Institute of Statistics, through open data platforms. One example is that the collaboration extends to analyzing feasibility of producing specific indicators. This is the case of the percentage of children over age for grade, the indicator 4.1.5, and the participation rate of youth and adults in formal and non-formal education and training in the previous 12 months, the indicator 4.3.1, with the segregation based on migration and disability status. So, as I mentioned, the repository in our regional commission of the household surveys and the repository of the population and household census give us a strength just to have the information, just to support countries to produce these kind of indicators. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rolando. Passing the floor now to Arman Badasht. Khosh Amadid, Head of a Statistics Data Management Unit at UNESCO, which is United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. This region covers over 4 billion of the world's population, so a big task, and I kindly ask you to keep your comments succinct. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. ESCAP has concentrated efforts on 2 aspects of the SDG indicators and data, including SDG 4. First is increasing demand for indicators, and second is effective use of indicators for decision making. On the first one, in consultation with member states, we have realized while developing policy documents and their monitoring frameworks are extremely important for understanding the real demand for data. National statistical offices traditionally are not comfortable or do not have enough political power to engage in this process. So ESCAP has developed a solution called Every Policy is Connected, or EPIC, which helps governments to identify policy priorities and issues, also identify the target groups that are most affected by those issues. In addition, define disaggregation requirements to monitor progress on those most left behind population groups. It has proved very effective in breaking this vicious cycle of user-producer dialogue, which we have been talking about for a long time. And like any other sector, education sector can apply this tool to engage with all the stakeholders. This is especially instrumental for developing national education indicator frameworks, and ESCAP is happy to work with UNESCO and governments to do that. On the second one, effective use of indicators, we've realized that governments need to customize indicators when it comes to monitoring SDGs at the national level. They would like to use their own data when there are more than one data points. I mean, there are inconsistencies. They would like to monitor progress against their own national target values. And they would like to easily visualize their progress dashboards. And we have developed a tool called National SDG Tracker for this purpose. More than 15 countries in the region, many of them in the room, have applied this tool to develop their national SDG progress dashboard for reporting purposes, including for voluntary national reviews. And this is also a tool which complements the excellent work UNESCO has done on benchmark setting. And both are available for all countries outside the Asia-Pacific region, and we're happy to work with you in implementing them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arman. Mr. Tawaka Naisoro, Education Data Team Leader for the Pacific Community.
Hello. Thank you, moderator. On behalf of the Pacific Community, or SPC, I would like to also take this opportunity to acknowledge the opportunity to come and participate in this dialogue. The Pacific Community supports 15 sub-countries that provide support through their funding on the running of the Pacific Community. And not only that, through our dialogue, we are able to engage funding from the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade for New Zealand, and other partners. And that is through our collaboration and on the emphasis on engaging our partnership on the purpose of funding. And through that funding, we are able to actually provide a more practical support on the development of data and statistics in the Pacific on education. And when I say practical, I mean we actually support the countries in the collection and the processing and management of the system through the education management information systems, as the countries all run their own systems, and we provide the support for that by trying to see if they can be able to engage programmers or developers that can work with them in developing their systems. We also have a system that we can provide, that is the Pacific School Information Management System, and that is always available, and the countries can use that to help in developing their systems. And of course, for the ISCAD questionnaires, we practically support them in the filling and verification of data that is entered into the questionnaires. So when the questionnaires are filled, the countries would send the questionnaire first to the education data team of the Educational Quality and Assessment Program of the Pacific Community. We are at the first point of verification or review of their questionnaires. we look at the gaps and see that there are no anomalies, or the data is ready to be presented to UIS. So that is how closely we work with the UIS to see that there are no irregularities, and we use our expertise in doing that. Also, in the same process, we work in trying to build the capacity of the countries. So we organize on an annual basis two regional and sub-regional workshop, and in those workshops build the capacity on how they can fill the questionnaires using the data that they have at their disposal, and with that they can be able to produce their benchmark, and at the same time build capacity on analysis of the data and helping them identify their benchmark, formulating what benchmark there needs to be for the individual countries, and to report on them. Of course, as a last point, I would say that because of an annual agreement that we have with the UNESCO Institute of Statistics, engaging the regional advisor, and in that agreement, there is a strong collaboration with UIS into working with the countries, so the UIS would accompany us in the developing of capacity for the countries and helping them provide the data. And as a result of that, we are able to get some very good results, even though we have been able to get information from the countries, from all the 15 countries that we support. There are still some gaps, as some countries are producing data that are of previous years because of the ability to collect the data for the most recent years is always a problem or an issue for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tawaka. I pass the floor to Mr. Stefan Hermans, Director for Policy and Evaluation at the Directorate for Education, Youth and Sports and Culture of the European Commission. European Commission is the regional organization for Europe and North America represented on the SDG4 High-Level Steering Committee. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. Good morning. Thanks for the invitation to the European Commission. Representing here the European Union, which constitutes of 27 member states that have a deeply integrated economy, and it also has a very close cooperation within the field of education. When it comes to the Sustainable Development Goals, and when you look at the European Union, what we have done as an EU is we have actually fully signed up to the Sustainable Development Goals, its objectives, and delivering on it. So in other words, also what we are doing within the field of education is very much embedded within this objective of the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's not an afterthought, it's not a complement, it's an immediate reference point for the activity that we undertake. The action that we undertake at the level of the European Union within the sphere of education is actually labeled under the heading of a European education area. For most, what is well known is that we support mobility, but what is also part of this European education area is that through cooperation with one another within the EU and between the member states, we actually also try to improve learning outcomes within the member states, improving systems within the member states through this cooperation. One element that is absolutely key in that is that we have a political agreement, ministerial level, on 7 headline targets. So, and that goes from basic skills, but also digital skills, early childhood education and care, early school leaving, tertiary educational attainment, vocational education and training, adult learning. So on these, we have clearly set targets at the level of the European Union. Not to name and shame, but actually to have ambition and to be able to track how we are following up on that. You will have recognized that some of these are actually at the very heart of the benchmarking that you also have at the Sustainable Development Goals. And we actually formally have signed up to that, particularly when it comes to basic skills, the early childhood education and care, and the early school leaving. Now, having targets is one thing. As we also heard in the keynote, you also need to have a system, and it needs to be systematic, what you do. So we have an annual reporting tool, which is the Education and Training Monitor, which the Commission publishes every year. And we do not only report on targets, we actually also use a high number of other quantitative indicators. We also have qualitative material that we actually will incorporate into this analysis, description, comparable, once again, also with the objective to be able to learn from one another and to support from one another. This is only one aspect. I mean, just to say, as a European Union, we also have a general report done by our statistical office, Eurostat, on the SDGs, and we in 2023 also completed a voluntary review of all the SDGs, where we did not only report on what we do internally, that's between the 27 member states, but also on the external actions, so that we do in cooperation with other countries across the globe. Few elements also, I think, with respect to the data, because the quality of data is so tremendously important. So this is also why we can benefit from our statistical office, Eurostat, and the very close cooperation that has with the member states. But we also rely very heavily on the great work that's being done by the OECD. We also are engaged together with UNESCO in administrative data. So the last thing that I would like to say is, this is all established, but when you want to explore new fields, that typically is more complex and complicated. So currently we are digging in further now on the sustainability, so where we actually contracted out work to be done on providing a new framework. So we're looking forward, hopefully, to be able to report on that towards the end of this year already. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan. And I will now pass the floor to a colleague from the Global Partnership for Education, which is not a regional organization per se. It is the largest global fund solely dedicated to transforming education in low-income countries. And it's a unique multi-stakeholder partnership. But even though it's not a regional organization, in channeling a considerable part of external assistance to support countries, it is also somewhat supporting the area of data. Could you please tell us a few words about that? And I will pass the floor to Ms. Nidhi Khatri. She is the Results and Performance Manager at GPE. Thank you.
Is it working? Yes. So thank you very much for having me. So just at the outset, I'd like to note that the SDG indicators are very much a part of the Global Partnership for Education's results framework, the overall results framework. Now, in terms of how GPE works on data and evidence, we have several ways of doing that. GPE is supporting partner countries on improvements through country-level grants, the implementation grants, which are our largest grants, and also through the system capacity grant, one window of which is focused on data and evidence. We also have the knowledge and innovation exchange mechanism, through which there are a number of projects supported on data and on learning assessment systems. And then we also have a small pilot of technical assistance for countries to monitor and develop data systems, both in terms of reporting and for uses on the priorities that countries are identifying for their education sector. So currently we have about 60% of the 87 implementation grants, which are GPE's largest grants at the country level, active at any point in 2023, with about, the grants are 2.6 billion, and about $82 million are devoted to data systems. So 60% of the grants focus on data and evidence. So improving data systems is a core part of GPE's support. Then under GPE's current strategy, countries also assess the roadblocks, the issues, the problems in 4 different areas. sector coordination, gender evidence-informed sector planning, volume and efficiency of domestic financing, and data and evidence. And countries can elect to prioritize data and evidence streams of their programming and design very specific and concrete results-based indicators. So for example, in one of the countries, one trigger for results-based financing is recruitment of statisticians at the central level and academic inspections to ensure that reliable data collection is in place. Another one is around the establishment of teachers' databases so that information on teacher contracting, education and learning can be collected. So there are different mechanisms that GP aims to support data systems with, both in its generation and use, with partner countries leading on specifically where they need the support and where they would want the financing to be programmed. And then, of course, all of that links up with these regional processes and the global processes as well. But it's a country-focused, country-driven approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nidhi. This was a very rich responses and very nice to see this support system coming from the regional organizations. We heard a lot of things, I mean, anywhere from, as Albert mentioned, from awareness creation of the importance of comparative data. We've heard a lot of countries, organizations talking about data priority needs and capacities being assessed so that there's a better understanding and tailoring of resources and tools and trainings. We also heard about regular trainings and accompaniment of countries, promoting best practices, of course, technical support, advisory support, facilitating different experiences. Interesting examples such as the National SDG Tracker mentioned by ESCAP. Some countries going down all the way, regions supporting countries in actually filling questionnaires and having regular systematic capacity strengthening workshops. Very interesting example from the European Union that has a guiding framework with 7 EU-level targets that also overlaps with the SDG4 benchmarks and also ensuring that all member states of the EU are endorsing the targets and participating in data collection and reporting with common tools. GPE also, thank you for sharing about the number of country-level grants to improve data as well as country-level model assessment of data. And this exchange between countries, learning, good practice, challenges, all of this is very important, and we encourage you to also develop knowledge hubs and to share with us at the global level. The SDG4 team at headquarters has a knowledge hub that wants to spotlight different examples and allow countries this facilitation of knowledge and exchange and lessons between countries. So thank you very much for that. Without further ado, we will move on to the second question, and I ask you please to remain succinct in your responses. A couple of nights ago, we all were there for the launch of the second edition of the SDG4 scorecard, a really impressive way of measuring progress. And the SDG4 benchmarks align national, regional, and global education agendas. In your view, what else can be done to improve coordination, and what opportunities do you see coming out of this conference? Please mention just 1 or 2 points and remain succinct. Thank you. I will pass it to Albert from ADEA to begin.
Thank you. It's actually a follow-up to what I've said in the first question, and what was actually, I'm actually echoing what the Commissioner again was talking about. I think any collaboration to work needs to meet a number of requirements or conditions. And number one is to have a common vision and agenda from the perspectives of the member countries as opposed to partners. Because the idea here is to say, how do we make sure that countries take lead, and we as partners, we support them to achieve their vision. The second is to avoid fragmented interventions. which I was seeing everywhere, that may probably come up with island of success, but with limited scaled impact. So how can we consolidate our interventions so that when we go to a single country, we have a common vision and a common voice? To me, that's really very important. The other aspect is the issue of sustainability. And sustainability here means we need to transition from project level to system level. Because at some point, we need to make sure that countries take over. So if I want to measure the success, in this case of our collaboration, I would actually want to see countries, through the education sector plan, they are able to integrate the issue of data, and this collaboration has actually provided the country with the tools and the capacity to implement accordingly. The last but not least is also to strengthen the capacities of existing structures. Capacity building of existing structure to me is so important because this is how we are going to bridge national, moving from national, regional, and global. So basically, the point I'm making here is we need to make sure that countries understand they are taking lead, they are the first that are in need of data. The data we're talking about is not actually UIS or any other organization that is looking for. It's actually for a country. Once they understand that, that they are the ones taking lead on this, and they are the one in needs, and then they can actually be demanding for quality data, not the other way, the other side. If I was a decision maker, I would be the one to demand for data because I know for my decision to be informed, I definitely need the quality data. So I think we need to build that. Our initiative is around raising appetite for decision makers to be demanding for quality data. And partners will come to support accordingly. So let me stop here, but that's what I want to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Albert. Helen, please, from CARICOM.
Are you hearing me? Okay, I think one of the key areas for us as a secretariat where we think coordination can be improved is that I am very sure that even based on our discussions yesterday, we realized that there is need for shared understanding around the definitions. I think we need to be consistent in ensuring that we are all together on the definitions of the indicators, how they can be operationalized, and what assessments are to be made at the national level. So we'll be speaking the same language. Another area I think that we would like to see more, that would improve coordination, is the whole of society approach. Some of the work that we do and some of the indicators, they would require the input of other sectors. So I think our recommendation is that we'll be working with other sectors. And one of these, again, yesterday it came out that of what is being done at our national levels with the statistics division. So we may be working in silos. What we have been discussing even at the CARICOM Secretariat is how even internally we have cross-cutting programs. So gender is collecting information, youth development is also collecting information. How can we synchronize and make sure that across the board that we are understanding what each other is doing? And I think too also looking at how we work as a regional organization, we think that we can do more benchmarking as a secretariat, that we would have one pool of data. So while our member states, they're all collecting data, when persons are asking or want to outsource data, they should not be going to every member state and not getting the full picture. So we are thinking of maybe from this meeting coming out of the recommendations, how we can assist in really doing the marking, as a secretariat to support our member states. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Our dear Albert from ADEA needs to unfortunately leave us because he has a flight, so I wish to thank him and excuse him from that. Thank you. Okay, querido Rolando.
Gracias. Thank you. I think I will now switch to Spanish. And I would like to talk about Latin America and the Caribbean. And one of the issues that we have is that we have the Statistical Conference of the Americas, and the chair is currently the Dominican Republic, and that is one of the subsidiary bodies of CEPAL. And this gives a whole regional approach, a regional forum in which all of the statistical officers of Latin America and the Caribbean, the national statistical officers, participate. It covers a variety of subjects, including the promotion of national statistics. The conference promotes the development and improvement of national statistics and their international comparability. Also, the conference follows the recommendations of the UN Statistics Commission and also facilitates cooperation between countries and with the other international bodies. There is a whole cooperation program each biennium organized by working groups that is in charge of organizing cooperation between the various countries for the production of documents. And this platform enables us to launch a certain number of projects, especially relating to Agenda 2030 for the Sustainable Development Goals. And we have a number of follow-up measures. We have high-level seminars which are organized by the Executive Committee every year or every 2 years at the renewal of the chairpersonship of the conference. And we also have the Network for the Transmission of Knowledge, which is a set of seminars that are organized online. And this was extremely useful to us during the pandemic, in particular, to support changes in methodological changes and surveys during the height of the pandemic, at a time when we were introducing methodological changes in our surveys. We also have a set of working groups. Countries table proposals, and then the agencies support the countries in supporting extra work. So we have, for instance, the FAO has presented proposals through member states, the ILO as well, and we would be delighted to have support to build a set of questions on education for household surveys that we may introduce in this framework through the Statistical Institute, through UIS. And we also have a group of statistics for Agenda 2030 in Latin America and the Caribbean, where we also monitor the specific agenda. There are 10 member states in this group. We are also carrying out a complete diagnosis of national capacities in terms of developing indicators for the SDGs, and especially, of course, SDG 4. So this is ongoing work. We have an online information system that is managed by the countries, by the National Statistics Office. So with the conference, we would like to build in coordination with the Ministries of Education and the National Statistics Officers a working group that could also follow up on the work of this meeting. Thank you.
Ocampo. Ahora doy la palabra.
I would now like to give the floor to Mr. Arman.
Thank you. Next week, we are launching Asia Pacific SDG Progress Report, which is produced by ESCAP in collaboration with several UN agencies, including UNESCO. The report features the great work done by UNESCO on benchmark setting, and it highlights that 65% on average, 65% of the selected indicators have benchmarks in Asia Pacific. And the lowest coverage is for indicators on learning, as low as 33%. And why is that so? I think this is an important question, and I see an important role for this conference to discuss and answer that question before we start to think about finding a solution for that. The work on advocacy and coordination requires incentive, and political incentive is on the top of the list. I think voluntary national reviews, VNRs, are a great opportunity to work with the government when they are incentivized to provide data and show the progress of their country, to advocate for those indicators and benchmarks. Our assessment of the VNRs, starting from 2016, shows that among those indicators that governments did not want to use in their VNR are those that international agencies have produced, not the national statistical system, even though they have tried to engage with them. But there is an issue of ownership, and addressing this issue of ownership is not only possible by developing frameworks and methodologies. It requires collaboration. So in this room, I think majority of your countries will have at least one VNR from now until 2030. And we cannot afford to miss this opportunity to advocate for SDG 4 indicators in that in VNR. We have, in our assessment, we have realized that working with governments for their VNR preparation, we have managed to not only move statistics from the annex to the core of analysis, but we have also more than doubled the use of SDG indicators in their VNR. So it is proved to be really effective way of coordinating. And if you allow me one more minute, I would like to reflect on the broader coordination, which I think it has to go beyond coordination among state agencies or state-related agencies. And it is not only enough to get private sector and civil society involved. We need to, any coordination mechanism has to recognize the agency of individual members of society in their learning experiences. ISCED is any standardization framework, including ISCED, is a framework to quantify social realities, and nobody has the golden key to the social reality, being a government or Minister of Education. It is a co-creation in the society. And if I wanted to aspire, only one objective for this conference is to see a mechanism in place which facilitates engagement with the members of society to influence the methodology development and design of the way we measure their experiences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bidarbart. I will now pass on the floor to Mr. Tawaka Naisoro from SPC Pacific.
The Pacific Forum Education Ministers meeting, that is the forum for the member states, financial states of the Pacific, requested that UIS and SPC come together and be more rigorous in their data collection activities to ensure that SDG 4 and the PACREF, the indicators for the Pacific framework, can be adequately monitored. There is also a request that comes with that. That is to the countries that they provide the support in providing the necessary data for reporting against the SDG 4 benchmarking. The Pacific Regional Education Framework, as I was talking about, the PACREF, is a way of aligning the Pacific region's indicators or to the SDG indicators and vice versa. And it is a great opportunity as some of the indicators there, such as cohort analysis, completion rates, out of school. These are also common indicators that are in the SDG. So when there's a monitoring of paragraph, our own paragraph, it also covers the SDG 4 benchmark indicators and the common indicators of SDG 4. The Pacific now has a country that is part of TCG, and that is a great milestone on SDG 4 indicators. Tonga, apart from SPC, we now have another member that we can work with, and to ensuring that there is collaboration and networking, especially among the countries of the Pacific. Pacific Island countries are well informed about UIS and SDG websites. They are not, I would say, are not well informed, so they can be aware of the gaps that are there to motivate them to work on strengthening the reporting. That is where PACRAF comes in again. Because in PACRAF, we have a partnership with the universities and other stakeholders such as UNICEF and UNESCO Pacific. And that is an opportunity for us to work with them into other areas such as getting higher education data and data on other, through that networking with our partners in the Pacific. The development of the status of Pacific Education Report is also an opportunity to bring together information that are missing from the UIS reporting. And through that report, we hope that we can publish that, put that in the website so that it can show some of the data that has been missing from previous year, and it has been too late for countries to report on those data because of the timelines of March and September. They can still report on that, and they can put that into the Pacific Data Hub, which is the website for the SPCA itself. On the opportunities, the delegates from the individual countries and our regional organizations can take this as an opportunity to learn from good things that are taking place regarding data and statistics in other countries and regions. At the same time, use that, what is being learned to be contextualized by assessing on what can best work in our systems. We are able to look at the bigger picture on how data is going to be used for international reporting against the SDG 4 goals and its use also by those at the decision-making level and those who are not education data experts but acknowledge it as being useful for research and bringing about impact on various social, health, and economic issues. So that is one of the big motivations. Going back to the first day, we decided as Pacific Islanders, these data focal people who are here today, to listen to the plenary session on higher education. It is well understood among us that there are challenges related to data collection and reporting at that level. So knowledge and challenges relating to administrative data, we hope to work with our Statistical and Development Division, SDD of SPC, strengthen that network so that we can, as they work very closely with the NSOs on looking at population data and household surveys. And because of that, we will be able to, if we work as a region in trying to strengthen collaboration with our partners, we will be able to, I'm sure, be able to meet those indicators that are missing most of the time, such as those on teachers, expenditure, population data, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Naisaro, for sharing those strong ambitions. Moving on to European Union Commission now, Mr. Stefan Hermans.
Yeah, thank you, Lily. Once again, I'll start from what we do within the European Union. But maybe also important to say is that we also try to engage our neighboring countries, and particularly those who are on a path to membership of the EU in particular, within those activities. But even beyond that, as some people in the Commission like to say, we are open for business, basically meaning we're open to share, to learn from one another, but also to share what we have to offer. But the key word, I think, from what I want to say on what we do, particularly on this, is the very close cooperation that we do have with the member states, but also how we try together to bring in ownership and to have active involvement of all the different members within the education community, and sometimes even beyond, because not everything we can do by ourselves. So it's a relationship with governments, but it's also a relationship with civil society, with international organizations, with training institutions, but also with teachers, with trainers, with students. And all of this is actually put together within a governance framework. So it's organized, it's structured, it's continuous. And it is not just about targets and indicators, but it is also on what do we do then with this knowledge? How do we try to improve the situation? What do we learn from one another, to peer learning, to peer counseling? But also, how do we agree with one another what the next move will be? So both on a policy level, but also within this governance framework, we have a dedicated working group that has its task to work on indicators, prepare targets, so that before a political agreement can be made, that we actually have gone through the technical work that needs to be done, so that we have quality data, that we do know what methodology to use, so that it is, and I think we heard the word earlier here, evidence-informed. This is something which is not just a matter, once again, for the European Commission. Earlier this week, we had in Brussels, during the Belgian presidency of the Council of Ministers of the European Union, a two-day event solely dedicated to evidence-informed policymaking. And obviously, targets, indicators are a very important ingredient of that. I also would like to very strongly emphasize the involvement of the broader education community, because it's not just a government level thing. So we organize summits on that with the entire community. We also have an interactive platform online. We also launch policy initiatives to, when we draw lessons from or certain conclusions from the data that we have, how do we address it? For instance, how do we work on school success? How do we work together on the green transition and sustainable development? But also, how do we have a bottom-up approach and not just a top-down approach, for which we have, for instance, an Education for Climate Coalition? I know we are running out of time, but I also want to add a very specific point, and that is, when you work with targets and indicators, to be meaningful, it is helpful that you can allocate financial resources to deal with this. So at this level, also within the European Union, particularly over the last couple of years to the Recovery and Resilience Facility, so post-COVID, 13% of that entire envelope has been dedicated by the member states to education and training. And I think it's a reflection of how hard it has been for young people in school and how much we need to be able to catch up, what we need to do in terms of the digital transition. So that's what I wanted to emphasize once again on this cooperation, and not just within the EU, but once again, we're also ready to support projects, programs, capacity building, also in other parts of the world through our international department.
Thank you very much, and well noted. I will come back for a quick summary. Now to Niti at GPE. In the GPE results report, the 2025 National SDG4 benchmarks are being used to aggregate the targets of your developing country partners for the 2025 strategy, for your strategy. What potential is there for these benchmarks to be used further for policy dialogue and for investment in data, especially those countries who have not yet such targets? Please, in 3 minutes, if you can. Thank you.
Thanks, Lily. So as you mentioned, first, as a partnership, GP has incorporated the SDG indicators in its partnership results framework. And it reports against these indicators in its annual results report. The Global Education Monitoring Report Team and UIS are important partners in this work. And in fact, the first chapter of the results report on the SDG indicators is authored by the expert team at GEM and UIS. So we're very much coordinating on this, and it is something that GP highlights. A methodology comparable to the one used for the SDG scorecard is followed, highlighting the country's progress relative to their national benchmarks and to progress countries could make should they move at the historical pace of the 25% of countries that were fastest moving vis-a-vis those targets. Now, in the most recent results report, we recognize that most countries, most partner countries, do not have learning data and, in fact, don't have targets because of the lack of data. And I think Ben Piper referred to the numbers from the results report in which we indicated that for 56% of the children in 12 partner countries, monitoring overall is difficult for many of the indicators, not just learning. So that is obviously something that we're looking at sort of the global level for GP partner countries and calling attention to that issue. We also track, as part of the GP overall results framework, another indicator, which is essentially the proportion of countries that report at least 10 of 12 key international education indicators to UIS. So we see that this figure has gone down from 46% in 2020 to 38% in 2022. Data on teachers and education financing have been particularly challenging. We recognize that often countries do have this information, but for various reasons it doesn't get reported and doesn't get recorded. So as part of this overall results report process, GP provides customized country-level dashboards on all the GP-related indicators to each country, each partner country, which shows the indicator value for the country and with comparators for its income group and averages for the overall global indicator. So these are some of the ways in which GP calls attention to the global processes and to coordination. And highlights the international processes in place to drive towards data in those processes. Now, I'd like to also emphasize the points that a couple of other speakers mentioned, which is really the ownership of the data, the understanding of the data, the use of the data at the country level. And as I mentioned previously, GP's country-driven, country-level model includes an assessment of data and evidence and a policy dialogue at the local level with the local education group on the bottlenecks to data, on how those bottlenecks could be addressed, and how GP grant financing could be leveraged for taking that work forward in alignment with the country's priorities. So, for example, the assessment looks at whether a learning assessment was implemented, and the report is available in the past 3 years. Whether an EMIS, a statistical report, is available for the past 2 years. If not, what were some of the roadblocks, how those can be addressed. So with those sort of things, and with keeping the national priorities in mind, which could be, for example, foundational learning or teacher development, how data and evidence programming can be deployed in support of those national priorities in alignment with all other actors at the local level. So the focus is very much on alignment, coordination at the national level vis-a-vis the national priorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was another very rich round of discussion. And we heard several key messages. First and foremost, I would say, is not to burden countries with fragmented approaches, and if there has been consensus built around a set of indicators, and to see the regional organizations and other entities supporting this process. And we also heard that the strengthening capacities of existing structures. CARICOM is making efforts to ensure a common understanding on the indicators across countries, and also aligning education sector plans with the development goals, but not in a silo, a fragmented approach, but more in an integrated approach. There are several, for example, in ICLAC, Regional Statistics Conference of Americas, and how to push stronger to have education on that, on the agenda of broader ministerial and statistical conferences. Some regions have specific conferences as well, such as at the Pacific, and how these forums can be used to share knowledge between countries, especially on how data is used for international reporting. Interesting example again from EU on the reformed governance framework. And you also mentioned going beyond just governments, which was also very much emphasized by ESPAC, Asia Pacific region, the role of non-state actors, including citizens in this process, not to underestimate that, because it is about governments working with non-state actors. A good suggestion on the voluntary national reports as well, and how to push for more reporting on SDG 4. And for GPE, it's very great to see this example of GPE aligning its efforts with the global indicators and supporting countries in their efforts to report on them. So thank you very much to the panelists. I didn't introduce myself at the beginning. I'm Lily from UNESCO and managing the section on global cooperation for SDG 4. And we are looking forward to continuing working with all of you and supporting you. And I'm the only thing now between you and the coffee break, so I will stop here. We're running a little bit behind, so we will go directly. We invite you to Hall Ségur for a 30-minute coffee break and then quickly back into the room.